Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. I am your host, Teri Wellbrock, and I'm excited to have Matt Bennett here with me today. So welcome, Matt.
Good. How you doing this morning?
Awesome. Wonderful. It's a beautiful day in Cincinnati, so yay.
Excellent. I was just in your neck of the woods working with Cincinnati Health Network a few weeks ago. So enjoyed a great trip to your city. So.
Oh, thank you. That's great. So your role in the trauma-informed world. I love that I saw on your website, or no, it was through your email that you sent to me, trauma-informed everything. I think that's fantastic.
Yes, I'm still trying to search for an arena that this information around the ACE study and just what we've learned about neurobiology and epigenetics, where that doesn't help inform our thinking. So it's so fun to make a career out of something that I think is such a paradigm shift in basically any aspect of our society where folks are struggling. So I try to find where the world might need me and my energy and try to provide good tools for folks working in that area.
I love it. And so you have a podcast, you've written a book, you have another book coming out this month. Yeah. You have a blog. I love the name of your blog. You're a trainer, speaker. I mean, that's wonderful. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you. I've just been really blessed to make my passion my livelihood. So I have to pinch myself every once in a while because sometimes getting on and off planes seems like an exhausting trek. And then I just remind myself and pinch myself that people fly me around the country to talk about my passion. So that any little burnout I feel or exhaustion goes away pretty quickly.
Yeah, and we talked just a minute before we started recording about that. You find that soul purpose, and
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, you can't help but just be excited about it. So
absolutely, and how fortunate are we to do the work that we do?
Absolutely, I have a regular day job. I own another business, and that's in a totally different world, unrelated to this. But this, oh my gosh, I could do this. I do it all the time. Like the editing and the recording and the writing and the newsletter and all of that. It doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, exactly. And again, there's always another challenge too. That's what I love about it. If you think you're an expert on the brain, you've got some reading to do.
For sure.
It's so humbling at the same time. And I just kind of look at which mountain of knowledge do I need to climb next to bring resources and tools. And boy, to live a life like that, I'm just so fortunate.
For sure. So talk to us about the book that you have coming out. It's trauma-informed in relation to early childhood education, correct? Or early childhood.
Absolutely. So this book emerged. I had just published, I have a little supplement follow-up called Talking About Trauma and Change that really was all the analogies that I love analogies. Like, I think there's acronym people and there's analogy people, and I'm definitely on board with the analogies. And some of my first readers for Connecting Paradigms, which you want to do a nerdy subtitle, a trauma-informed and neurobiological approach to motivational interviewing implementation. My editor said nobody's going to read a book subtitled that, and then she read the book. Is like, it's exactly what you wrote. So keep the title. So I'd written this and I had packed it with my analogies, and some of my editors were coming back to say, hey, there's windows, there's elephants, there's cups, and you just got to take some of these out. So a lot of the things that I really use in my trainings to really simplify a lot of complex science just kind of fell to the cutting room floor. So I gathered all these together in a book, and really the book wasn't the big thing. I wanted to really create an audio book so people could play these different chapters as part of group therapy or even individual work as well. So they didn't have to memorize all this, but they could easily play it, and then there's discussion questions. So my wife and I were actually sitting in the Denver airport, which I know you have family in Denver as well. So you're familiar with our airport a little bit.
Yes.
And we were kind of talking. We were kind of toasting her birthday, toasting I call it my 1.5 book that came out, and we started talking about what I was going to do next, because if you don't occupy my time, I go crazy. And every night after school, she's a first grade teacher, so she comes home and we talk about her kids that are struggling. And the more I started to learn about trauma and stress and attachment and epigenetics, our conversations got deeper and deeper. And, we kind of looked, that it's great because you can pull out your phone, and, that we couldn't really find there's some great books on elementary, trauma-sensitive elementary school, a little bit on early education, but we couldn't find any kind of from the teacher perspective. So we wrote a book through her voice about how early education, elementary school, teachers and school staff can really identify students that are struggling with trauma. Hopefully, again, that ACE question, not what's wrong with this kid, that not label them the bad kid, but what's happening to this kid. And hopefully we make a good argument for why we need those mental health resources. I like to say not only in our schools, we need to get them into our classrooms. People like me with the therapist background, we got to get our butts out of our offices and be real resources to teachers. So we go through about creating what's happening to these kids, again, and then how to create trauma-sensitive classrooms, schools, and then we kind of end the book on one of my I think most important topics in our time is self-care and creating healthy school environments in this context. So it's in the final stages. It's 99+% done any day. Hopefully it'll be up on Amazon soon. So
that's awesome. I'm finishing up a manuscript, so I get it, and congrats, and thanks to you.
It feels so good when you can say finishing up. And
yes, right.
I'm sure you get this. People ask me how long it take you to write the book. And, for Connecting Paradigms, it was 18 months and 18 years both. That's my answer. Yes.
And, coming back to what you just said, I worked in a mental health agency in Cincinnati area, and I was assigned to different schools. And, oh, my gosh, the teachers would just reach out to me constantly saying, how do I help these kids? What do I do? I mean, they just were overwhelmed and frustrated because a lot of them knew this kid is either currently in a trauma environment with poverty or, drug abuse, alcohol abuse in the home, or they had experienced it and they knew it, and the children were, and again, so we would talk about, things that they could do. But at the time when I was in that situation, there just wasn't a lot available. And so your book is just a godsend to teachers. I mean,
I really hope it, and hopefully gives us, because I always have teachers when I do school trainings, come up to me and says, hey, I'm one teacher. I've got 30 third graders. 5 of these kids are throwing chairs every day. How can I both regulate their behaviors while teaching the rest of my class? And it's like, you really can't. I mean, I wish I could. My joke answer to all these really hard problems is I wish the answer was just more vitamin D supplements everybody could take. But we really need to rethink about how we support teachers. Para support in the classroom, mental health support in the classroom. My real hope is that we put out a good argument for why that investment in our children is going to pay off many times. So let's invest in schools so we don't have to keep building prisons, and invest in the kids that something's happening to them. And I like to compare trauma and the neurobiological, physiological injury to like an athletic injury. And if a running back in football breaks their leg, but they get treatment right away, they're probably going to bounce back pretty good. But if they don't get treatment for 10 years, they can still heal, but they're going to suffer a lot more. They're going to walk around with those symptoms of that broken leg. And too many of the folks that I come across in my work in homelessness and addiction and healthcare were those kids that were just labeled the bad kid instead of getting the real help that they needed. So I hope we can add something to that crucial conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And see, brilliant analogy, because I mean, there you go.
I told you, I can't spell an acronym, but I've got my analogies.
I love it. And one of the things, again, that just popped into my head, being in a classroom, and for whatever reason, I flashed back in time to this, first grade classroom and talking to a teacher. And one of the little girls was coming to see me, and she was so surprised by that, because she was like, she's so good and she's so quiet and she's just like that perfect little student. And so I would make sure to remind teachers that it's not just that kid that's acting out, because a lot of these children can shut down on themselves and try to be so perfect because they're so afraid of, you know, the consequences that may come. And so their children can respond in so many different ways to trauma.
Absolutely. You can, as I like to say, you can start with go by the principal's office. That will get you your first kids you probably need to work with. But, you know, we can't, I just think back to my own school experience, which is longer and longer ago now. It's just the kids that always seem to fade into the background. That just, you know, in high school, I always remember these kids that always had, whether they were walking down the hall or in class, they were always had their nose in a book. Like they were just so good at hiding. And I think a lot of those kids, like you mentioned, can fly under the radar as well. And if we don't have that trauma lens on, we'll miss them, because the kids throwing the chairs will get all of our attention. So we got some work to do, but I hope we're like people like you and the work you're doing, and all of us out there doing the work around ACEs and trauma every day. Boy, it's so fun to watch this information just. I can't believe we're in schools. Like I'm so excited that schools now call me up to talk like that. What a cool police forces. Like it's just so cool where this information is spreading and transforming areas of our society.
Yes, I love it. And again, thank you for doing it, because it's needed, and having been there, I know it. So yeah, wonderful. So any myths or facts that you would like to clarify for listeners, either around ACEs or trauma?
Great question. Boy, where to go with that one? I guess the one I'll put a little bit kind of coming from the side with that question answer. And it's one of the things I really try to tackle in connecting paradigms. Because I really, the whole, this is just how like I said, one book's at a bar at Denver International Airport. The other one is I woke up one morning, and I'm a big motivational interviewing fan. If your audience isn't familiar with, it's a cognitive behavioral approach to help people change behavior. So, you know, a lot of folks that working in homelessness, I do some work in HIV, like these people are facing multiple major life changes. Right. And so I kind of woke up one morning, it's like, I've trained on both of these things. It's like somebody's had to write a book on, you know, how do we help people with the neurobiology of trauma? So the overactive sort of limbic system or the amygdala, you know, we can actually see the prefrontal cortex, or that thinking part, smaller in size. How do we help that brain contemplate and successfully manage bigger life, you know, changes than I've been lucky enough. I've never faced having to go from living on the street to permanent housing, or trying to kick an opiate addiction. And a lot of these people have these multiple things going on in their life. And, you know, I knew the brain of trauma, but I really could start to appreciate that changing those behaviors are also helping change the physical structure of our brain. So a lot of people who pass someone experiencing homelessness can kind of just think about, well, why don't you get up your butt and go get a job, right? That, you know, and then that is if your community has enough affordable housing, which isn't the default for a lot of cities that I travel around to. And I think we have to, as we've come to appreciate trauma's impact on the brain and behavior, we also have to understand that, you know, to really support new behaviors, for that person to get up and eventually get back in the job market, be permanently housed, being that tax-paying citizen that we all seem to care so much about, is that there's got to be a lot of neurobiology. And the great things, brains, that neuroplasticity exists. But again, if they stay in survival mode, we can't really expect them to do these big behavioral changes. So as I like to say from, you know, my work as a therapist, if they don't have housing, food security, if they're in a domestic violence situation, if they're struggling, I'm going to case manage them to help bring safety into their life. So eventually they're able to have enough psychological safety with me, physical safety in their environment, so they can really sit and contemplate some of these big changes, which if you've ever faced a big major change in your life, you know it scares you. Again, a lot of these folks are facing multiple, you know, I have this activity in my training is I have let's list the changes our folks are facing. And boy, that half of the paper fills up. You know, there's no problem filling that side up. And what are the barriers? No problem. I mean, it's the quickest activity you can do because it gets done. So as we have grown our compassion for those with, as I like to say, untreated trauma and that impact on them, you know, I think that it also really, the neurobiology informs how we see people facing these big life changes. And again, hopefully helps us have empathy and compassion and patience to say, hey, just this person contemplating change is a big first step. And we know with MI, if we're pushing action, but they're still in contemplation, that's where resistance and the break of the relationship often happens. So that the myth is people just can't, you know, occasionally there's always outliers, but you just can't wake up one day and decide to change your whole life, that your brain needs to catch up and really support the new behavior while kind of weaning itself off some of that old behavior as well. Right.
Yeah, so true. And I think about, you know, when I had panic attacks, I couldn't logically think my way into a different reaction. I had to go through, one, the healing part of it and processing, you know, through EMDR. And then two, I had to go through then what you just talked about, the brain plasticity of changing habitual patterns and changing those, you know, I like to think of it, I was stuck in these ruts in my brain of these patterns. And so when I started to step outside my comfort zone and create new habits and new ways of responding and reacting, then I started to create new neuron pathways.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in the old behavior, I compare it, especially when we talk about addiction or those highly ingrained behaviors, like a super highway of neurons in your brains. But, you know, that old Neb principle of what wires together, fires together. And so the new behaviors, like if you know, coming out to Colorado, I heard in a previous episode, you went out to Estes Park. If you just decided in Rocky Mountain National Park just to go walk any which way, go off trail and walk, it's very slow process. And so I like to compare that, again, another analogy, but when we start that new behavior, it's like hiking off trail. Eventually, if we practice it enough, it'll become a trail, then maybe a sidewalk, then a backcountry road, and eventually we're shifting where the old behavior becomes smaller and weaker. The new behavior becomes the new stable behavior. So, but that doesn't happen overnight. And I think if we can look at our own experiences of change and say how we've struggled, hopefully we can give empathy and understanding that none of that's going to happen in the vast majority of cases if physical safety is at all threatened, because all of our energy is going to go to surviving whatever threats are in our environment. So that's where getting people in housing, getting people the resources they need are those critical first steps for healing and change to really ever occur.
Yes, absolutely. And beautiful. Again, thanks.
Thank you.
I love it. I can say amen and hallelujah to all of that. So, all right. So another question that I had, and I just want to throw this one out because it's my fun and I throw it in randomly. If you could meet anyone, dead or alive, to help you with your mission, who would it be?
Oh, wow. I've listened to your podcast, so I knew this was coming. And I was like, just say Oprah, Matt, just say Oprah, because Oprah gets it. You know, when she came out with that 60 Minutes episode, I just started bawling. Like, I'm an emotional guy anyway, but it's like, did she just like quadruple? How many times more people now have heard of ACEs and got to see Bruce Perry? And so, boy, it would just be easy to say Oprah, but I will go there and say, I would love to meet President Trump. And I say that, and I won't get political here. I'll just cringe and hold it deep inside. But I really want to believe that those of a political, okay, I'm going to dance on difficult water here. Those of a political persuasion that really believe that the person experiencing homelessness is just lazy, that you know, there's just, you know, all these issues are just in the individual, is, I believe, where we're really at in this movement is we need it to be at the national policy level. We need to figure out ways to get into the offices of our elected officials. And hey, if you can get a school board member, this is what I tell the teachers who are like, how do I do this? There's only one of me and 30. It's like, well, what if 20 people in your school called a school board member for coffee and talked about this? You know, so our advocacy is every which way. But if you're going to let me dream, I want to go straight to the top. And I want to throw a bunch of neuroscience out there. I think what I love about the science of epigenetics, neurobiology, you know, all the things about our nervous system is it takes it off as it really concrete as something happened to this person and showing the biological injury. So I always like a good challenge. So I'd love to get Trump and Mitch in a room and Ted Cruz in a room and say, hey, I think we share some of the same values in life. You know, and granted, call me the secular humanist, whatever the heck that is. I'll take whatever hippie thing you want to call me. But let's get to the science and say, okay, does our current policy make sense based on this really hard, well-established science of the neurobiological, biological impacts of trauma? So I want to believe, because I've had this experience over and over, is when we get the science, our compassion and empathy goes up. So, you know, if I could be in a room with those people that have the ability to change policy and not do some of the things that often make the problem worse, I would take that in a heartbeat, and try to maintain my emotional regulation during that experience. So there, I'm stepping away from the political in this. I just should have said Oprah, but.
Great answer. I loved it. And
Thank you.
What popped into my head was you said that, I've seen on Facebook a number of times, you know, like a quote that somebody puts out, but it shows a picture of 4 different brains, and underneath each brain it says, you know, like ADHD, PTSD, I forget what the other ones. Depression's
usually in there, addiction, yeah.
Yes, and how different those brains look, and so you think about there cannot be this cookie cutter approach, you know, of everybody being. You've got to take a look at, and I think it all comes down to trauma.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. You know, and if we can heal the trauma, it's not for a lot of folks because they've been living with, again, like the running back. If you don't get treatment for a broken leg for 10 years, healing's not going to happen just because you now have a permanent living situation. That's a part of it. But I think really helping people understand who they're creating policies around. And I do this with helping organizations, medical clinics, schools. So we've got a lot of work still to do in the helping healing professions. But boy, I just see, like you said, I mean, here's a biological injury. And if you start to look at it as an injury, because we wouldn't blame the running back for a defensive lineman hitting and breaking a leg, are we going to blame a child for experiencing abuse or poverty? Right. Or neglect? And it's not the kid's fault, but it is, I believe, our society's fault now that we have this information that we don't get that kid the help they need, and then we label them homeless, criminal, addict later on in life. And I think every person, for the most part, that ends up in our prison systems, ends up in our substance abuse, ends up in our shelters as adults, is a failure of all of us. And now we have the science to really to look at that in a whole different way and ask, okay, based on neurobiology, right, brain science, what can we do to really mitigate some of these issues that are impacting our communities? And what an exciting time to live in that we have this. So, you know, it's my thing. Some people get surprised at this is how I see trauma-informed care or trauma-sensitive schools as part of my advocacy work. To me, it's as much as a social justice issue. Even more so, I think it's more of a social justice issue than it's a clinical issue. I think it's both. But if we don't have policies that in our communities, how do we expect organizations to do trauma-informed care? How can that one teacher with 30 third graders create a trauma-sensitive classroom and meet the needs of her students experiencing trauma? And the answer is, until our policies catch up, we're going to be fighting an uphill battle, which we've made a lot of progress going up a big mountain. But, you know, I'm hoping we bring more people into that climb and really address some of the policies that, keep people stuck in these really difficult life situations.
Yes. And again, I come back to this book you have coming out. The sooner we can get a hold of these kiddos to help them, oh my gosh, what a huge impact that's going to be further down the road.
Yeah, and maybe I can get kids initially, or people to care about kids first, right?
Right.
I walk by the person that's experience, and strung out on the sidewalk, and are they dead? I want them to have compassion for that person too. But I'm also very realistic, and to me, the book about schools is my upstream solution, my contribution to an upstream solution for homelessness, addiction, poverty, criminal justice reform. Now it doesn't seem like that on the surface, but for every kid we get the help to, it's one less kid that's going to end up hopefully in a shelter, or in those hard situations, which are so life-threatening for so many.
Right. And I got a little teary-eyed for just a second, because it made me think about it. And I've talked about this on the podcast, but a long time ago. And I just want to say it again. When I was involved in 2 bank robberies, and by the same people, like they didn't get caught the first time and then they came back 3 months later.
Oh, jeez.
Well, during the first one, the man held the gun to my head. And then when he came back in the second one, he pulled the trigger and murdered one of my coworkers. Well, I remember when I finally came to a point of forgiveness for this, assailant. And I've written about it in my book and other places. I had this realization that he and I were both born these innocent little creatures, these little babies.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the way, I don't know his story. I don't know what happened to him along his journey. And again, I get very choked up about it, because my heart hurts for him, because not that I'm making excuses for the choices that he made, but somewhere he was broken. Mm-hmm. And he then went down this dark path and then chose to pull that trigger. And so that's where I say, oh my God, if there had been something in place to help this boy. Yeah. Before he got to that place.
Absolutely. And wow, thanks for sharing. That's powerful. And yeah, and it's I think it is difficult, because we had a really good thinker in the criminal justice system. If you're going to try to figure out that behavior, like what gets somebody to a place in their life of desperation or greed or whatever it is to do such a horrible act, explain that. And if you ask that to a neurobiologist, they kind of shrug. I mean, because we have to have so much information we almost have to have a perfect amount of information on that individual. And then there's still gaps in our knowledge. And I just think, why, what happened to that person? And it takes so much patience on your part and just love for humanity in the world to get to that place of being harmed. And but if we can get there, like I said, I hope, and every time there's, and being married to an educator, I mean, this is so real. A school shooting, or now shootings seem to happen you can't go to a movie without looking for the exit, or a concert, or driving down the freaking road. And, it's just like, and everybody comes out mental health. And I just want to say, let's run with that. I have my personal opinions on, machine guns being available for purchase in our community. But what are we going to do about that mental health crisis that we have? And hopefully my answer is, let's get the people that are injured by trauma the help they need when they need it, so we don't deal with this. And maybe trauma accounts for 90% of that kind of extreme behavior. Maybe it's 60%. But it's somewhere, be it living in Denver with Columbine and the Aurora shootings. And, we had a young lady come in from Florida with obvious mental illness things and bought a gun and shut down the entire metro area school district. And she ended up killing herself. I mean, what's happening to these people, and why aren't we getting them the help they need? And it seems like we agree with that politically, but, mental health doesn't magically show up in schools. It needs funding support to really do this. But there's so many reasons why. And I hope that we, like stories like you and doing what you do, boy, if we can just get it out to 100 more people, 1,000 more people, and maybe they tell. My challenge after my trainings is tell someone about this. That's why, like, I hope one of my analogies stick, and you can go tell your husband, maybe your kids, your neighbor, a family member, you know, because once we get hopefully enough people on this topic, we'll really see the change in policy and funding too. Yeah. So we don't have to ask those same horrible questions. I mean, there's a fix to this, and that's the exciting time we live in. And good for you for finding that love and compassion and forgiveness. I'm sure that was a heck of a journey on your part.
Thank you. And it was, you know, I think I realized it when I checked on him every now and then in prison. I would just get on and make sure he was still in. He had gotten, you know, the death penalty, but he never was put to death. But I just wanted to make sure he wasn't back out. And so I couldn't find him in the system. And I was like, oh my God, he's not in the system. So eventually I got a hold of, you know, someone a family friend who was in Washington, D.C. and had a little bit of clout, and they got a hold of the prison. And then the prison called me, and they said, oh, well, he just died 3 weeks ago, you know, in prison. And I'm not kidding when I say I fell to my knees and just sobbed for him. And, you know, was like, God, I hope he found forgiveness. Like, I hope he was, and I knew then, I was like, all right, I've reached a place of forgiveness with this person, and knew that I had, and it was just just a release off my shoulders. So absolutely. More people can get to that point, because don't carry that burden. It's heavy.
Absolutely. And it's this, and this is where, you know, a part of my thinking, the restorative justice stuff, and giving different ways to look at how do we as a community address some of these behaviors. I mean, there's some people like this example that need to be taken out of society, and we've kind of failed to the point where it's no longer safe. But it's like, how can we as a community come around and really, you know, really address these real issues? And it's like we have the motivation and the angst and the anger and the sadness for about 3 days, and then, you know, it goes away to the next one. And I think it's on I think the listeners to the podcast, how do we make it sticky? And if that's, like I said, reaching out to a school board member, or, you know, I think we sometimes give up our power and our frustration in our cable news watching, but it's like, you know, you get 7 or 8 people calling a school board member, they'll have coffee with you. And, you know, you introduce trauma-sensitive schools or trauma-informed care. They may not go change everything, but as I like to tell people, you're planting the seed. Yes. The next time they hear it, they'll be like, oh, so there's politicians, they like repetition, right? And I think if even if you're the one that plant the seed that doesn't grow right away, you never know where the wind's going to blow that sucker. Wind, water, and dirt are going to hit it, and it could grow into something really beautiful too.
Yeah, I love what you said. Just keep bringing it up, because eventually they're going to go, oh, I think I heard Dr. Bruce Perry in Oprah talking about that.
Yeah, that is, yes. As I made a wish a few years ago before Oprah came out on our podcast, like, well, what do you know, we kind of this New Year thing where it's like, well, if one thing could have, if you could have that magic wand and wave it, what would you do? And it's like, I just went, and I went with George Clooney. I didn't even think we could get Oprah. And, you know, the fact that Oprah and Bruce are best friends now, and that's, you know, what a powerful way to get it out there. And again, let's build on that momentum, because again, it's going to take a lot of us going in there, because people can watch a 60 minutes episode and forget about it the next day too. So, like I said, though, if we're a bunch, I love your hashtag trauma warrior. Yes. I love that. I love that. You know, Oprah gave us a gift, right? So let's get that trauma warrior hat on and go take advantage of the door that she's opened for us. Because we're not all Oprah, but the real work gets done at the community level as well.
Yes, I just was you took the words out of my mouth, like that grassroots level is we just keep moving with it. So wonderful.
Absolutely.
So how do people get a hold of you if they want you for a speaking engagement, or to get in touch with you, see your website?
Yeah, so connectingparadigms.org. Your little box will pop up. Social media. I'm trying social media. I'm working hard. So that gives you all the updates on my writings, podcasts, blogs, my travels across the country, talking about the passion. So yeah, connectingparadigms.org. We'll get you all that information, and also let you know when that book hits the shelf. So. I'm hoping by the end of this month it will be up, and the audiobook soon to follow. So
awesome. So it's not available for pre-order yet.
Yeah, I was going to do that, but Amazon kind of is touchy. They want only ebooks up for pre-order. So I don't know. What I learned from Connecting Paradigms is there's something about us where we love to hold books.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what, I didn't know yet, but it's like everybody wants to hold the book. So I'm just going to get it all out at once with that. So awesome. I figured for those folks who'll get mad at me if they can't hold the book, they got to hold I'm like, well, you can hold it in your phone, your e-reader, and it's really easy to take notes. Nope, I got to hold the book. So for all you people out there, I'm not going to make you wait. So it'll all drop at once with the audiobook soon to follow.
I'm going to crack you up for a minute because I'm going to move my camera and just show you.
There it is. Yep.
My file. Yeah, because I'm the hold the book girl, and I have. Yeah. I do read on my Kindle, and I have it. I know I've learned how to highlight on my Kindle, but I love my books.
Yeah, I know. I say, well, the ebook you can do. Nope, I need the print book. So I did that with Connecting Paradigms. And I actually was able to do it through with a publishing company where I could actually just offer it pre-order for a vastly reduced price. And half the people that bought the ebook version didn't know they thought they were buying the actual book, even though it fairly clearly stated that it was just an ebook file. And they were upset. Well, I want the real. So I'm going to just drop it all at once. So all you people that need to hold books still,
I got you.
You'll be able to hold it in your hand, and it's fun too because I played basketball throughout college, and it's been so many years since anybody asked me for an autograph. I wasn't even that good at basketball, so it's like, and now people bring the book up, and it's like, it's that fun dopamine release that I get. So. That's
fun. And I was just going to say that too. That pile right there is actually from podcast guests that I said, can I buy an autographed copy? I mean, some of them, have sent them to me as a gift. But yeah, I love having the autographed signed copy.
All right. I'll keep that in mind.
All right. That's right. I'll send you a little email.
Yes, please do. We'll put you on the list. Get you a copy for sure.
Yay. I'm excited. So good.
Awesome.
Well, is there anything else you want to touch upon that we didn't talk about?
The one thing I always like to just throw out there, because I think sometimes with the ACEs studies, and we miss, I think, the biggest piece of all of this, and that's our own self-care. If you're in the field of healing, helping others, whether it's healthcare, education, social work, we're dominating the top 5. I just saw new research out: physicians 1, nurses 2, social workers 3, teachers and principals 4 and 5. And we can talk about trauma, we can nerd out about the brain, and do all this stuff. But when I've really come to the conclusion that if we're not healthy, we're doing harm at this point. There's no reason why your healers, physicians and nurses should be 1 and 2 of the most burned out people. As I like to say, I want to make it real for you. If you pack a stadium in your community full of all the different professionals, and you wanted to find the most ill people based on profession, you'd call physicians up first. Just think, what's wrong with us when our healers, at least from the medical perspective, are the most mentally impacted by the work. AMA said 50% are experiencing severe symptoms of burnout, which means I don't want them as my physician, because I know that makes you're now in that reactive mode. Nurses, social workers, teachers. So I really think that the trauma movement, it's about the care. It's about the trauma sensitive schools, motivational interviewing, EMDR, all these trauma-sensitive yoga, trauma-sensitive mindfulness. We have all these beautiful things, but we really have to prioritize our own self-care. I like to say, if there's one thing you take away from this podcast, I know I'm just dropping it at the end here, but you are the role model for wellness. If you want to be listened to and call yourself a healer, your number one priority is to yourself, because people come in looking for hope. They come in looking that tomorrow can be better than yesterday. And if we're burned out or vicarious secondary trauma, it's over. And the bigger, then you just scope that out, is what's their experience in your organization? What do they feel when they walk through your door? Because, you know, if you want to know, in a lot of these helping organizations, the most important person, it's not the trauma trained therapist, it's the front desk person checking you in. And, you know, to think about our health and wellness as the starting point, because we can't do this work, and we put ourselves at medical, psychological, social risk as well when we don't prioritize our own self-care. So think of yourself as an athlete or a musician, someone who prepares for the performance of healing, because we got to get our butts out of the top 5 categories. And mental health folks, we're there, our police, our first responders. So people that others look to for hope and healing, we're the most messed up people in our community. And so we got some work to do. And if we're being police officers, I've worked with police departments, their stories, I just astound me. And yet we're beating them significantly. So if you're listening to this podcast, you got to take care of yourself first. We've got to start prioritizing that if we care about delivering quality services. Yeah. So I always like to end to make sure I squeeze that in, because self-care is quality care.
Yes, absolutely. And you touched on one more thing, and I'm just going to extend it for a minute.
Oh, please do. I can talk about this all day, my friend.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. When you said the, vicarious secondary trauma, huge. I mean, we could do a whole podcast episode on that.
Absolutely.
Because, and explain, if you don't mind, just for a second, that impact, because I think that's a very critical part of it, that's what's happening.
Absolutely. So really quickly, we know that you can think of emotions like viruses that get spread from person to person. So when we work, and I got a great physician friend of mine, Dr. Deborah Bourne, who works in a healthcare for the homeless clinic in San Francisco. She talks about those emotions, the hopelessness, the anxiety, the depression, all those really negative emotions that we work with every day is the fire we signed up to walk into. So that's part of our job. But the whole thing is that now that we know, and we got some, I've seen brain scan evidence of this. Also, we can get diagnosed for post-traumatic stress disorder with the only identifiable trauma being our work, is that trauma is also contagious. So vicarious trauma, I like to talk about, it's really that experience of walking through traumatic experiences with people that you care about, people that you're trying to help, and their trauma, especially if we can't jump in and fix the situation, because the teacher knows that kid's in danger going home at night. The person working with the intimate partner violence victim doesn't know if that person's going to be okay. Is the person who's not ready to stop using opiates, are they going to overdose? I mean, this is what we deal with. For some of my folks I work with, and in my past, that's our Monday morning, right? That's we haven't got to lunch yet, and that's what we're worried about. And then secondary trauma, in my thinking, is when, like, vicarious trauma kind of happens over time. Secondary trauma is when we can get re-traumatized, sometimes with trauma that we may not have fully healed from. And I like to say, you may be healed to a place you can go 90% of the other jobs out there and be fine. But this work, if you got a little crack still left, it'll come and do a jig on that crack. And so it can re-traumatize us from our own past experiences. I use the example is that I'm a survivor of sexual assault as a child myself. And it was really easy for me to work with victims of sexual assault, children I work with in child welfare system. But I tell you what, there was just this when I worked with my first perpetrator of sexual assault. I felt all that energy that I experienced during my abuse. It almost, I can say, it rose up from my stomach, and I was trying to like push it down, and it just like I was able to end the session and just overwhelmed me. And so I like to think secondary traumas, we can just get so hurt by our work. And sometimes it may not be our own trauma in that way, but it's just the relationship and that we care about other people. So, you know, on top of the burnout, we also have this work can really screw you up if you're not careful. It can traumatize you. And, you know, you look at the teachers, social workers who aren't just leaving their jobs, they're leaving the profession. And in my experience, we're a lot of times losing some of the really good people because they're just saying, I can go do something less stressful, make more money. And again, they just don't want to put up with sometimes the dysfunctional organizations and other things. So again, that's where we've got to prepare ourselves to go in that fire each and every day. We still might get burned every once in a while, but knowing if we do get burned, there's nothing wrong with us, that we're just a human being who cares about other people. And so that's where both the proactive self-care comes in so importantly. Sleep, diet, exercise, mindfulness, you know, all those key things, using therapy, social connections. And then when we do experience some of this, that we kind of know our triggers and we take immediate action so we don't go down the spiral of burnout. And, you know, as I say, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, stroke, early onset Alzheimer's, there's an ugly end to this, my friends. You know, it's ugly. You do not want to go there, and it shouldn't be the price you pay for dedicating to your life to helping others heal. Because if you're riddled with disease, you're not going to be that healer for other people. Right.
Yes. And again, amen and hallelujah.
Thanks for letting me squeeze that in, because I always... None of this matters if we're burned out, you know, and we lose these opportunities, both with the individuals we're working with and trying to help, but also, you know, if we're going to change our society to have a trauma-sensitive society, we better be at our best, because we need that juice to take us over the line here.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a big energy fan, and I think, you know, the energy we put out is, you know, that's what people are picking up on, and if we're giving off that burned out energy. Whereas if we're giving off the energy of being healed ourselves or in the healing process.
Yes.
And
they feel it, right? A lot of people, especially if they've been surviving, you know, harsh life situations, they know. And again, it's very unconscious for a lot of folks. They know when something's not right. They know. Now, they're not going to tell you, wow, you seem burned out today. You know, it might be really hard for them to put it. A lot of people put that into words, but they will just, they've survived by having a sense something's not right here. And I think we lose a lot of people to care, or maybe today was the day they were going to talk about engaging in trauma treatment or substance abuse counseling. And if they're not getting that feeling, that energy from us, we could do harm in that environment. So I like to challenge people every day, have some reminder somewhere of why you're going to work. Why are you showing up? Because it's the people that lost the why that I really worry about. Put it on your mirror in your bathroom, your dashboard on your car, write it on your forehead before you go to bed at night, something where you know why you're showing up and what energy you want to give people. It's, you know, and who knows what this, I could nerd out about quantum physics on this. I think there's a science behind it, but I like to go in and say, what energy do I want to give this person? What do I want them to walk away with, knowing my emotions are also contagious as well? And we could woo out about that probably 45 minutes. Sure. But then I'd have to bring out non-locality of quantum particles, and then people would just go to sleep. So
right. It's so true. You know, and I'll end on the fact that one of my nicknames is Glitter Shitter. So I just that's what I remind myself. I got to go out into the world and do some glitter shitter or some stuff. So.
Between that and hashtag trauma warrior, my friend, you got some trademarking to do. If you haven't, you need to trademark that real quick. Or somebody like I'm going to steal that real quickly. So. No, I love it. I will credit you with the glitter shitter for the rest of the time.
Well, Matt, it was awesome having you here on the podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And again, I saw you online looking for some folks and got into the several episodes before coming on. I just want to thank you for your work. Like I said, any media we can use, any way we can use to spread, and then folks like you, supporting people in their learning journey. Because, when I learned about the ACE study, it's been like 18 years ago now, there wasn't a whole lot out there. We didn't even have podcasts at that time. And I think, I think people are so fortunate now that they can get a look at this. And then, what you're doing, what I'm trying to do with the Trauma Informed Lens podcast, that you've got like 80 plus hours of stuff. I think we have almost hit 100 hours of recording. Awesome. There's just so much people can now learn. So all the support that you give folks in their continued learning is, again, if we're ever going to reach the top of the mountain and really integrate this into that we're trauma sensitive societies, or whatever word we use at that point, I want to thank you for your work and being a big push to this big mountain we both tried to climb.
Thank you so very much. That made my day, week, month.
Awesome.
And your energy, I just adore. I just think it's amazing, and I just want to feed off of it. So if you're ever in Cincinnati, let me know, because I'm just going to be in the front row of the audience.
I definitely will. Definitely will.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us today on the Healing Place podcast. And until next time, remember, be gentle with yourself. Thanks. Bye-bye.